I call the regular board meeting to order. All members of the board are present. Ms. Poulin, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And I just realized I said regular board meeting, so I call the special board meeting to order. All members of the board are present. Moving on, please be advised that in the event of a fire emergency and an evacuation should be necessary, an alarm will sound. Please note all marked emergency exits and evacuate well away from the building. At this time, we request that everyone turn their cell phones and other electronic devices to silent. Thank you. Item 3A, may I have a motion to take from the table the student board members committee charter for further discussion? Dr. Singh, seconds Dr. Spicer, all in favor? Motion carries unanimously. There are two versions of the student board member committee charter, an amend version prefaced by 2024-2025 and the original version ending in draft. Again, this committee will be advisory for the purpose of enlisting opinions of students, principals, counselors, and individual board members. The next step is to decide if we as a board want to proceed with the original version that allows committee input on the legally available options for designating student members of the board, or if we only want the committee recommendation on a more detailed process after the board decides on a preferred option. May I have a motion to approve the original student board member committee charter draft as presented? Ms. Poulin, Ms. Fletch, any discussion?
Yes. So just to be clear, if 5 votes vote for the original version, then we've just wasted 17 days and a lot of research. I will vote accordingly.
Thank you, Mr. Manna. Ms. Poulin?
I don't think the research will be wasted. It will be put to use. I would just want to reiterate what I have previously said, how important I believe that the voice of the students is at the beginning of the process. If we eliminate their voice at the beginning of the process, what is the message that we're sending to them about our willingness to listen to them when they are sitting on the board with us? As we always are looking at keeping the student voice first, that is my real concern in this process.
Dr. Spicer?
I think that the original construction of the group follows very consistently with what we typically do here in Williamsville for a variety of things, having the different stakeholders represented in conversation and research and recommendation. So again, it feels consistent. I do feel frustrated with the time spent on this because my original statement was, that the group is going to make recommendations to us and we are choosing the process. However, the exercise in the research was productive, at least for me. So I think that's important. But I do think that the model of the committee makes sense the way that it is structured so that everyone's voice can be heard and everyone can be bought into the process.
Ms. Fletch?
Yes, and I just want to say that I don't think I was really fully understanding last time I was misunderstanding what we were looking at. So after reading everything and, having it a little more clear in my head, that's why I changed my vote. So.
Mr. Poulin?
I just want to say, I don't think we're eliminating student voice. I think we're actually elevating it. We're giving it a different time frame. I think that I'm all for elevating student voice. I just think that the students need direction, and that is our job as elected officials to help them along the path. And I think it will only help elevate student voice. And I know you disagree with me. That's what makes America great.
Ms. Blackinger.
I have also had some time to think about it, and I do think we are letting them have their voice if we do come up with the process, not the process, but the way that we should select students. I think it would save some time, and there's also a lot to do once we determine what that method is. So they would come up with what that looks like and use their voice for that opportunity.
Before I go back to you, Mr. Manna, is there anyone who hasn't spoken yet who would like to add comments at this point? Okay, Mr. Manna.
I'll pass. Thank you.
Okay.
I think we had the full discussion last board meeting. I think I will not pass, obviously. And we had the discussion last board meeting, and I don't think there's a wrong way to do this. I think both ways empower and elevate students' voices. And for anybody to say that one way or another empower student voices more than another I completely disagree with. I think that when you empower someone by giving them direction and the freedom to choose the path based on, as an elected official, what we tell them to do, ask them to do, that's very empowering and very elevating. Again, my biggest concern is that this group does all this work on researching 6 methods and then researching and opining on 6 different ways to carry out those 6 different methods. And they come back to us and say, we like method A, and this board says, well, we prefer method B. The first thing, if I was on that committee, I'd say is, well, why the heck didn't you tell me you wanted method B in the first place? Then we've completely discounted the student's voice in this process. So that's all I have to say.
Any further comments? Okay. So we have the motion to approve the original student board member committee charter draft. All in favor? Dr. Spicer, myself, Ms. Poulin, and Ms. Flesh. So the motion does not carry. What will we like to do from here?
Well, we have
I should say opposed. Who opposed? Okay, it is everyone else. There are no abstentions.
Well, I mean, I can make the motion to discuss the other alternative charter.
Okay, there is a motion to approve the amended.
You want to call it Charter B? Because it's not amended anymore since
Right.
it's really a new thing.
Well, it was amended from the original.
Right.
From the original
You
charter.
can call it whatever you want,
correct?
but it's just a
So-
different, right?
The title of it on here is the 2024-2025 Student Board Member Committee Charter Mission -1. So that's what we are
Sure.
discussing.
Gotcha.
Okay. So there was a motion. Do I have Ms. Blackinger seconds it? Any discussion?
So just to be clear, we still have to determine what method we're using.
Correct,
So the-
because that is not completed in the,
That would be the
Charter.
That's the whole, right.
so that is the discussion. So I guess maybe we should start from one end of the table and move down with people's thoughts on which of the 6 methods. Mr. Bulin, did you have thoughts on that?
I'm not married to any of the methods per se. I think that the least one that I'm in favor, the one that I would be against, is us picking the student or students, because we are the furthest away from them. I think it has to be a committee of students, teachers, admins, school principals that know the student body better than we do.
Do you think we could just vote to eliminate some of the methods and then discuss eliminate some of the methods? Whatever you think, we'll move
That's
this
fine.
forward.
I mean, I would like to go down and hear what everyone thinks. I'm fine if we want to just at first eliminate some of the choices. So the choices are, just to be clear, duly elected as president of the high school, duly elected by the student body, selected by the high school student government, selected by the high school principal, selected by the superintendent of schools, and selected by the majority vote of the school board. And what I heard Mr. Bulin say was not the last choice, not selected by the majority vote of the school board, but was open to other options.
I have a question, and I don't know the answer, to be honest with you. Is it possible to do a hybrid of these, or does it have to be one? Because I could think of a couple different options that would work.
So in processes that other school districts use,
And I read- yeah.
they do combine some of these. I mean,
Well, that's-
ultimately, it's the last option is going to be the final, like, you know what I mean?
No, I understand. I just wanted to make sure, because I did read the materials, and it did seem like other school boards had done amalgamations of these.
Correct. But ultimately, it's the last step of that process is one of these 6 options.
Right. Yes.
And so that would be the same for us as well.
I guess my point is that if a committee came up with names, and I would have no problem approving those names, right? But I don't think we should be the people, the final arbiter of that, if that makes sense.
Okay, so what you're saying is are you eliminating any of those 6 choices?
That we are the only people that decide on the kids, if the
Okay.
last one, I guess.
So you're open to any of these choices, including us voting on it if it's vetted first?
Yes.
Okay.
We're going to have to vote on it eventually, are we not?
No.
No, not in this process. If we choose a process, then we will follow that process.
I mean, I am for. I'm sorry. I have a question.
I'm sorry.
I mean, listen. Whatever method we all choose, it's fine with me. But I think that as the board, we should, disassociate ourselves from picking who sits here. We elected officials shouldn't pick who sits next to them.
You're saying it better than I am.
It should be, not us. And I mean, and while I'm speaking, I mean, I am not in favor of E being selected by the superintendent. I think he has enough on his plate. But this is just, my thinking, which ones I'm not a favor of. I'm not a favor of A, elected by I'm sorry, B, elected by the student body. I'm all for elections, but I think that kids in high school have a lot on their plate also, and maybe shouldn't be running around looking to curry favor with their fellow students and facing opposition. And elections are not popularity contests. They're really unpopularity contests. If you're less unpopular than your opponent, I think it could be very divisive, and I'd like to shield that the students in their senior year from that. But that's just my thought on a couple. But other than that, I'm open to almost anything, and then letting the committee, kind of put the details together and the roadmap of how our choice is going to be implemented. Those are just my feelings on 2 of them.
So I just want to be clear. Are you then? I'm not completely sure.
Motion, but I'm just,
I know I'm not completely clear though. Are you saying that you are okay with giving this to the committee if we remove some of the options and then let them discuss all the remaining options?
well, no, no.
Still saying you would like.
I want to come up one option. I'll just
Okay.
name a couple I don't like.
I see.
Just to throw it out there and see if there's anybody who else doesn't like one of these letters, and we could say, well, let's remove that and let's discuss the letters that are here.
I see.
So we're going down the board, I believe.
Okay. Yes. Ms. Fletch, did you have any comments?
I have several comments. So I'm trying.
Can you
to-
move a little closer to
Yeah,
the
I'm
mic?
sorry. So last time, I don't even know. I can't even put my words. I do not like, I can tell you what I do not like, and I don't like B, the students elected by the student body. I also think I don't necessarily like C either, because I feel that the student government is also at times a popularity contest. So I feel that I wouldn't want them picking. So those are the two that I'm not fond of.
Okay.
Can we just clarify again, though? I'm sorry. You tell me again, because this, last week or last meeting, you didn't like, tell me again what you,
Me,
yeah.
I think that I'm all for having a committee, letting them
Okay.
run. But I think we have to tell the committee via vote which method that they should be using in order to get.
But
to-
even if they came back with a method and maybe we didn't agree with it, you could still say you don't agree with it, right?
Correct.
Advisory.
It's an advisory board. It is just to enlist their advice, opinion, and recommendation. Then it comes to the board for a vote.
Okay. So then, I guess that's what I wasn't really understanding. So I guess I wouldn't have voted, like I said, I wouldn't have voted the way I did, because I think that we're giving them, I've said what I said. So B and C, I do not like.
Wait, are we supposed to
going down the line?
communicate what we do like
Well-
and what
However you'd like to do this, I'm just going down the line so we can maybe try to eliminate some of the choices, because I don't know how we're going to get to one choice
Go ahead.
otherwise.
Okay.
So I'm for any method that gets us a decision quicker.
Well, are we going down the line or should
Yeah.
I raise my hand?
Mr. Biscaglia, are you ready to add to the conversation?
I guess. Go Yankees. No, the reason I voted the way I have is I actually, after doing research, being in a school that has a student on the school board, I like the variety, a combination of these to come up with choice while also giving students choice. That's why I'm one who that likes B. But ultimately, in my head, the way I looked at it after researching things is a student body would vote, giving all students voice, and then it would go to someone, either a principal or superintendent. I preferably don't like the superintendent. I agree with Mr. Manna. There's a lot on Dr. Brown Hall's plate, but possibly going to it.
Agree with Mr. Manna also. Let's make sure everybody knows.
No, it's true though. I mean, you have it. It's people don't realize how much superintendents do behind the scenes. Anyway, so maybe going to like the high school principal or a student body where it's your top 3 voters or top, however it may be. Just picturing it in my head, and then that would be the final decision. It's almost a combination of it where it gives voice to multiple avenues, where it's not just a popularity contest or unpopularity contest. I also have faith in the Williamsville students that they would do the right thing when voting. That's how I pictured it, and that's the only reason I voted the way I voted. Is I almost kind of want a combination of it, saying this is how, and then they come up with a method of how the voting would be done, and so that's.
Ms. Poulin?
I personally would like to see a method where names are brought to the board. I'm really concerned. One of the things that we haven't even begun to talk about is what kinds of qualities we want the person on the board from the student body to have, and that's where their voice is very important. And looking at the qualities that they want to have in their representatives, what's the best method for doing that? And looking at a process that will give us the greatest potential for the representative diversity amongst a multitude of variables. I would like to see some process developed toward presentation of a slate of candidates for the board to potentially interview and make that decision from. I would not want to see A, B, or C.
Ms. Bluckinger?
May I?
Absolutely.
Thank you very
Dr. Brown Hall?
Absolutely. What I would like to see is letter D with principals having a say in who represents their building. But what you can do is couple letter D, but when the committee meets, the board can say, we want to make sure that when you develop a process that it includes student voice, however that may look. And then the committee can decide however that may look. But I would ask that it's consistent at each of the 3 high schools, the way by which the student slate is selected. Now, if each high school then presents their 3 candidates to the board, and then the board sets up time to interview those students based on the qualities the board deems appropriate for student membership, that might be a way to go about it. Because then what you've also done is included student voice. You have the principal presenting their top 3 to the board. Then the board has an opportunity to interview those people to then develop or choose the person from each school that represents the board member. Just a thought, an idea.
Thank you, Dr. Brunhall. Let's wait. Ms. Blankenshare?
I agree with Dr. Brownell and Mike. I think there should be a little bit of the student voice in there, and that would include the student body vote and also the principal having a say, bringing forth, top 3 candidates. So it would be option B and D.
Mr. Mann, I believe you already provided yours, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Dr. Spicer?
So since I went down the rabbit hole of the research, I will be a little detailed in my response. So I very much like an application process. So I think that can look like the application to the building principals. I think just some things I want to keep in mind with a process that stand out to me, and part of the reason why the reason I wanted to be on the committee is for the application process. I want it to be a lot of the schools do an essay, like a standard response or a Google form. I would love to see an application process that is either essay, whether it's written, digital, art form, as to why they want to do it, but actually including different media so that you can be more inclusive for those students who are not strong in writing, because we tend to find the same students, which is why I think having a student government leadership is an easy and a way that makes sense for leadership here, but it's the same students, and so you get the same type. I also think that having references is helpful. In some of the schools had asked for references in the school from a school. So having a student ask for references involves the school building in that process. I like the idea of an interview. I think there's as a next step in the process. And there was a lot of different ways to represent an interview. I do a lot of hiring of student leaders, and I think interviews can be really tough, again, for those who don't perform well. So you have to be mindful of that, which is why I like a multimodal way of applying. And then there's, as far as qualities to Ms. Poulin, there are a lot of best practices benchmarked in the research as far as expectations of, in good standing, GPA, et cetera. But one thing I do, again, want to highlight is I like the idea, and this is a standard of practice in higher education, of not being a president of an organization. And this is really a time commitment thing so that the student isn't overextended. Because those who get involved, they get really involved, right? So just to help a student not become overextended. And also talking about the representation from across 3 buildings, having an alternate, a structured alternate that a student board member could say, student Mark, can you come in my place? And they're trained in the same way. It makes a lot of sense and allows for a lot of folks to get involved. So again, application process with an interview. I don't really fit the box of the letters, but I don't like an election process. So some hybrid of selected by high school leadership, I'm going to say, maybe not the principal because they also have a ton on their plate, but high school leadership, and with some sort of interview involving either the high school leadership and the superintendent or the board, something like that.
Dr. Singh?
I think you covered most of the points.
Sorry, I took notes.
No, I do agree with what Mike said and a lot of what Kerry said too, because I think this student is going to represent the student body of that high school. So I think the first thing would be is you might consider how many board members you're going to add to the board. Is it going to be 1 or is it going to be 3?
Mm-hmm. Good
question.
And the second question comes into thing is, since they're going to represent the school body of that high school, it makes sense to me that they're elected in some form. It doesn't have to be like a student or council elections. It could be like an interview process in the beginning, and then the top 3 candidates have an election, and they represent their school. It's like a combination of one or two of these things. And going back and looking at what other schools have done, some have formed committees, and the committees do the screening process for the students, all the students who apply and send in their essays, or they send in their intent to join the board. In my opinion, I think that should be the first step, and then we can go to the election or selection, whichever one. I'm not tied to any one of them. So that's my opinion.
I appreciate what you said about the committees, because that was another thing, and I failed to mention the committees reviewing redacted applications, I think is really important. So it's a good way, like you said, Dr. Singh, to narrow down a group of candidates to whatever the next step is that we decide.
Yeah.
To speak for myself, I honestly would prefer at this point to maybe eliminate some of the things on the list and then send it to the committee for their advice. I feel very strongly that I would like the principals and students who will be sounds like likely be involved in this process to have some sort of say in this before making a decision as the board. So I'm having a really tough time eliminating anything. So
What was that last part?
I'm having a difficult time, saying one or the other of these, because I do really feel like that anyone that's involved in the process, the students that are going to end up being student board members, and it sounds like for most of the ideas that are floated here, the principal would have some role in this process. I would really like to, again, maybe if we as a board wanted to eliminate some of these or send several ideas based on what everyone has said here tonight to the committee for them to then have discussion about, that would be my preference. Mr. Biscaglia.
When I was speaking in terms of election, I didn't directly, as Dr. Singh said, the 300 and something kids at Williamsville South are voting. It entails if you're running for a public office of anything, you would enter your name. If you're going to be backed by the Democratic committee or the Republican committee or the Conservative committee, you meet and do interviews with them. You have essays, or as Dr. Spicer said, it can be other ways, which I did see some of that in research, and I love that idea because, it doesn't sway certain students from attempting to apply. But that's how I envisioned it. And that's why I was saying it's kind of a combination. And on what Dr. Brownhall said, essentially going to the high school principals, because they're the leader of the building. Essentially, the way I'm looking at it is you're sitting in front of the Democratic committee or Republican committee. There's the head of that committee, and they're, kind of heading the questions and decisions in the end of who they're going to back in terms of an election. That's why it's kind of like a combination. Like in my eyes, if we were going to eliminate things, high school student government would be eliminated, superintendent would be eliminated, and the student president of the high school would be eliminated. That way, it's leaving it to the 3. We're kind of all combining anyways. Right. Student body, the principal, and the board, as ultimately that could do interviews in the end and see maybe there is a top 3 sent to the board and it gives voice. I think that's ultimately what we're all kind of asking for. And it gives a combination, where a committee could also develop the strategic plan behind it of how the actual plan goes forward, if that makes sense. So as an example, maybe this is how you're going to apply. Applications are looked over, screening interviews by the high school principal and assistant principal, and then it's picked a group of 5. The students vote on those 5. the top 3 go, top 2 go to the board, and we do an interview with them going, and it's just an example. I'm not saying that's the way to do it, but in my eyes, you're giving them 3 ways that they can develop that,
Stuart
you
was
know, process.
I think,
Sorry.
for me.
So going by what you said, let's eliminate the ones that seem to be eliminatable. So giving Dr. Brown Hall, the superintendent, just in general, we can take that off the table, correct? Everyone, do we need to motion to vote that, or can we just eliminate that? So can we all agree to eliminate that? Yes?
Dr. Spicer had her hand up. I don't know if she had something.
But we'll need to make a motion in the end as to what we're all agreeing to.
Okay.
Um,
I'm just trying to
and the way,
unwind it.
sure, and the way that the amended charter reads is we will put in that slot maybe more than one, it sounds like, choices here, but we can add those to the amended charter that would then go to the committee is what I'm hearing. But again, we'll need to make that motion and vote on that in the end. But at this point, we're still having discussion, I believe.
Before we go into the methods, do we need to vote on how many board members we're going to add? 1 or 3?
There'll be 3.
One from each high
So
school.
do we need to agree on that, vote on that, or anything?
Well, that's
It has to be by law.
Yeah, it's set in a,
equal representation.
It needs to be equal representation by law. Whether or not all 3 come to every board meeting is another story, something that would need to be discussed and determined. But there needs to be equal representation. Mr. Manna.
Sure. Thank you. I'm all for whatever, gets us to the finish line here. But I will caution, and I'll say it again, I don't think this board should have the final decision on who sits up here. I think that when you're chosen or elected, the legitimacy of your election is very important. And we certainly don't want people thinking who did not get selected that, oh, I wasn't chosen because, the person who was chosen is neighbors with, one of the board members or whatever. I think it's very important. But again, I'm obviously whatever the will of the board is, but I would caution us, giving them or telling them, here's the methods to choose. But at the end, we're going to choose that person. I think we have to keep that at a grassroots level, so that the students' voices are really empowered and really heard. That it's their representative, not who we think is a best fit.
Dr. Spicer?
Yeah. So what I was going to say was it maybe offer some language change. So instead of saying elected by the student body, because I think we could probably land on compromise quicker if we change language to selected, similar to these other suggestions. So we are talking about, or at least I feel like I'm looking for themes. So I feel like we're talking about selected by high school principals, selected by student representatives from each school, similar to how we have the committee suggested right now. We would maybe have a selection group representative of student representatives from each school. We have principals from each school, and I think we had some other building folks at each school. I don't know. It doesn't need to be that big, but maybe if we can change the language from elected to selected by student representatives from each school, that might be a little more palatable for those of us not sure about the election piece.
Dr. Singh?
I mean, from what I'm hearing, we are boiling down to 2 suggestions. One is elected or selected by student body and or selected by this high school principal. My suggestion would be like incorporating both. Have a committee with the principal as the chair of the committee to look at to screen the initial applications, and then have an election, in which case we don't have to change any of these rules. It's just a combination of 2. So who are the candidates are chosen by the high school selection committee would run on a ballot to the regular high school elections, and one of them would be elected.
Comments in response to that?
I tend to agree with Dr. Singh. I think, again, I agree with Mr. Manna. I think we need to keep our,
Dr. Professor.
our honorary Dr. Manna. I think we need to keep our hands clean on this. I don't think that we need to make that decision. Like when we ran, I didn't sit in front of you guys and you didn't say, oh, I like Buell and I don't like Buell. And I don't think that is our role here. I think that the students decide through whatever process that we, and with the help of the principals, and we go forth.
Clear. May I?
Yes.
So to be clear, I thought at the last meeting, what you all decided to decide here was the process here, and then send that to the committee to develop procedures.
Mhm.
So if you decide on a couple of processes, then send that to the committee to develop procedures with individual recommendations or suggestions like Dr. Spicer had.
Yeah.
Right? So
When I was getting to it, you
Right.
said it better.
right, but all the examples you can share
Yeah.
with the committee for the procedures.
Yeah.
But if you guys solidify what processes here, again, I mean, the one you absolutely should not choose is letter E. And then going from there, right? Pick the 2 or 3 that you want them to combine or use, send it to the committee for procedures, and you're good.
I would agree with those two also.
I mean, if you have another option like adding B plus E, then that could be the last option.
Here you go,
Plus
Miss.
B.
I know. I think, to me, go ahead. No,
I'm still stuck on the election, no election thing. I don't feel like we've landed. I think like I recommended selection and then Dr. Singh, you said election. So for me, I'm stuck on that.
I prefer selection versus election.
I'd be open to changing to selection also.
I agree with that. That was a great idea.
And just to be clear, though, by law, it has to be one of these options. So we could change to selected by the student body if that came first,
what's coming first?
if it came first in the process. And then we had one of these other methods to follow up from it, because that's the kind of the final method. But I don't think in the end, you know what I'm saying?
Like,
It depends on how, sorry.
no,
It depends on how granular we're getting. I think Dr. Brownhall is saying, keep it broad, let them get into the weeds, but we could recommend selected by representatives of each student representatives from each building and high school principals from each building and combine it into one. And then they work the details out. No?
well, I mean, like you said,
Okay, I'm just going to throw out here, though, we're telling the high school principals that they're going to have to do this without having their input into whether they feel comfortable having done it. We've all said, several people have said, we're the school board, we don't want to do this. Dr. Brown Hall has said, I don't want to do this. And those are legitimate things for them to say, and we're not allowing the principals to say that.
Well, I did say principals and or building leadership. So we could change that language as well.
or their designee, whatever.
Designee, I like
I mean,
that.
just, to get granular, I think maybe the method would be selected by the high school principal. But, the path to that is the selection committee. So if you're doing the one, I would think that the final one is really selected by the high school principal. Then people are going to feed up to him how whatever names are given, and they're going to come up with that method.
The principal can also choose in the committee to make the process where he uses guidance counselor input also to help him.
Okay, well, we need someone to make, unless there's further discussion, we need someone to make a motion as to what we are including in that amended
I'll make a motion.
draft. Well, but you need to say explicitly what that motion is.
But Carrie
Okay.
said,
Okay.
I make a motion to include the methods of letters C. I'm sorry, B, selected by their student body, and also letter D, selected by their high school principal.
Is there a second?
I just have a question. I just want to make sure I understand.
Yes.
We say selected, we're going to leave it to them to decide how that selection goes.
For the committee.
Yes, okay. I just wanted to double check. Yep. I'm sorry.
So the motion is that the two options that would be included in the amendment are selected by the student body and selected by the high school principal. Ms. Bleckinger made that motion. Do we have a second?
Well, I'll second, but on the question. So which one is last?
I just wanted, do I need to make a different motion? I just want to combine your language. So like, I agree with what you're saying. I just think.
You can, we need a second and then we can do a discussion and amendment.
Okay.
So Mr. Manny, you second?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay. Discussion on the amended motion.
Okay, so to Ms. Bleckinger's motion, I think, again, I'm going back to language here. What we said is combining, I don't want to be stuck in A through F. I want to say a committee of selected student representatives from each building and high school principals or designee, and combined it into one. And then we're talking about the committee talking about the details. So I think it just, those two thoughts are yes, but I would like to combine them into one rather than saying A and or what,
Process.
one motion. Or yeah, one process, I guess.
Can I,
Mr. Buscalia has his hand up.
No, I just, in terms of what Ms. Bleckinger said, it was fine. I have to agree with what Dr. Spicer said, amending it because it's that broad discussion. It gives them opportunity on that committee to develop that process while incorporating both A and or whatever letters. I'm not even going to say the letters because now I've lost them. Incorporating those ideas.
Indeed.
It's not that the motion was wrong or I wouldn't have voted for it. I just think that combination leaves it broad enough while also combining what we're asking.
And it's also specific so that they are clear.
And I love that.
All buildings are represented and leadership is
And that ending, however,
Fine.
Dr. Spicer said, principal or
designee.
designee.
Yeah.
It really leaves it open. It leaves it open.
I would agree with that.
That's all.
Works, yeah.
Mr. Bulin?
okay, I'm going to throw a little fly in the monkey wrench here. What happens, shouldn't it be designees, not designee? Like what happens if you want to have two guidance council? You know, like, shouldn't we have the broadest?
That's
No.
the process then. That's
It's not what we were discussing. We could be a different motion if you want multiple people.
Well, I thought we're superintendent. I thought we discussed superintendent and or his designee.
Principal.
Principal, yes.
The principal.
Not
The
superintendent. don't
Sorry.
He really wants.
You made that clear.
Let the record show.
It was principal
It's all good.
or designee, comma, yes, or parenthesis, S,
Yes.
parenthesis,
Yeah.
S.
and
I mean, I don't know, right?
So I am not sure that I am clear at this point, and I apologize. So are we saying that these two processes, selected by the student body and selected by the high school principal or the principal's designee,
Right.
then we're just going to leave it at that and let them decide at the committee
Yes.
Yes.
what the next steps are. We're not detailing any further process than that. We're just saying
Mhm.
these are the two things the board has
These are the things that.
chosen,
Yeah.
and we're going to add that in that section of the amended draft committee charter. And then it goes to committee and they're figuring everything else out.
That's right.
Is that correct? Are we all on the same page?
Does anybody have it like written down so we could,
Can say it again.
we could say?
I think Dr. Spicer's like point on. She
I can.
said,
Because I write policies all the time. It's terrible.
And I negotiate policy. That's why I say, what exactly are we voting on?
You and I both said designate. It was a great team effort.
Because it
What-
says in the original motion, the original charter. So I stole President Bogner Kazimier's language.
So I can say it again, but I think the S matters, as I always think the S matters. So if we want to put an S, principals or designee, then we need to I'm going to recommend we need to put a limitation on the number of designees if we're adding an S, in that you don't want South to have 10 people, North to have 2 people, and East to have 3. So that I think it would be a slippery slope maybe
What numbers are you referring to?
of designees. Like they're saying we said principal or designee to give the principal a choice of whether or not it was the principal or someone else. But then if I'm correct, Mr. Bulin, you said add an S, because what if they want to have a guidance counselor and the school social worker and
But isn't that the more detailed
That's-
process?
That's procedure.
Yeah, that's the procedure. So I think the only thing we can we can leave the motion as stand, I believe, with selected by the student body and selected by the high school principal or designee, and then the committee will come up with the procedural.
okay.
components
Yep.
of that.
I just wanted to
believe
represent the
so.
S.
And I think that part of it is going to be really critical, because we would like this, I would assume, we would like this procedure to be exactly the same in
Exactly
all
the
3
same.
schools. It's
Absolutely.
imperative that it is.
Right, so we're all in agreement that we're sending these choices to the committee so that they can come up with a very specific procedure that's going to be used in each of the 3 high schools to select their one student board member from their school who will be representing that school on the board, correct?
Yep.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we are all on the same page.
Waited
Mr.
to the bottom of
Briscaglia.
Oh, just as real quick to get it over with. So that was going to be my question. So essentially what we're doing in terms of the committees, they're making up that process for all 3 schools. And then ultimately it's coming back to us anyways. And if there's a discrepancy or something we see that might not be fair per high school, that's where we can step in as the board and say, well, it might not, 5 might be too many. Can we make it 3 or whatever it may be? But it's leaving it broad enough where the committee can develop it for all 3. And it comes back to us still anyways to kind of follow.
Correct. Either, no matter what.
Want to make sure I was
Yes, no matter what, it's an advisory committee, so it comes
Right.
back to us for a vote.
Yeah, it says, right, any recommendation will be presented at a board meeting, and the board then has the right to accept, reject, or modify all or any part of the recommendation.
And the reason I say it out loud is I just want
Nope, that sounds perfect.
everyone hearing that that's the idea of it. And
Oh,
that's
yeah.
why we're leaving it broad.
Absolutely.
Okay, so are we ready to vote on the motion that Ms. Bleckinger made, that Mr. Manna second, to add the selected by the student body and selected by the high school principal or designee to the amended charter? We're ready?
Yep.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Are we adding sorry.
Adding
So we
S.
need to change the language on the motion is my face. I just don't know of
Dr. Spicer amended the motion. Do we
Right.
have to
or I conversed about it. I don't think I amended it.
Well, there was no like
motion to do
Under
it? That's what I'm saying.
point
That's why
we were discussing like point 1. We're adding the school board choice.
Correct. So let's pull up. So we're all clear.
I just wanted to be clear. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Oh,
that's
no.
okay.
Possible we could throw the language up here
So
or no?
what the,
There, Nick.
it would be, the student board member committee will be responsible for
Thank you.
researching and discussing the legally available options listed below for designating ex officio student members of the board, such that the ex officio student board or member of the board will be the following: selected by the student body and selected by the high school principal or designee. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I don't love this. I want it to say selected by student representatives from all 3 high schools and high school principals or designee. I would like it to say that.
Well, that says something that's different then. The way
Why?
I read it. The way I read it when you
Am I getting lost in the how?
Well, no, I think what you're saying is the way I'm hearing it is that that student body or that student group and the principal make the decision. I thought it was the student body makes the recommendations of the students to the principal and
That
the
would-
principal
That
chooses.
would be procedural.
Yeah,
Yeah.
both of these things are
Ah.
procedural. What I thought we were at here is just saying that these were the two choices that we're comfortable with and let the committee decide the procedure from there.
That's right.
Am I?
Yeah.
Yes, I was
Mistaken.
lost in the how. Yes.
Sorry, that was my fault too. That's-
Okay.
Yeah.
Now it makes sense.
Are we all clear?
Yes.
Yes.
In
Yeah.
fact,
Okay,
we're
so
having a-
that, the motion,
a motion that Ms. Flickinger made, and then I have a second from Nana, and amending.
so under the responsibilities number 1, where it says add our choice, the choice would be selected by the student body and selected by the high school principal or designee.
Yes.
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 Yeah.
Winner, winner, chicken dinner.
So that is how this charter will read.
Let's vote.
Well, you do
Just
want,
checking to see what else we need.
do you want there's some
Everything-
dates in there, like under 4? And you have to put, if you wanted to put a benchmark, put a date in there.
Do we want to have a date to add to identify all the members and have the first meeting?
I don't think it's possible to have a first meeting before November 12th, so I will say that right
Yeah.
now.
That's why I cross it out.
Well, no,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's in there,
In 5.
We just need to be determined.
but there's a,
Oh.
So let's continue to amend by removing A for A. Ms. Pullen can still give an update regarding the, where things are at,
Even,
November 12th.
yeah, you
meeting.
could say we're not anywhere,
Yeah.
or we're here.
So we'll just,
Update, yeah.
we will strike for A and then re-letter those.
okay.
And then the meetings will start by November 2024.
Mhm.
Keep it general, yeah.
For under meetings where it says add date, we'll do by November 2024
Hmm.
until their work is complete on or before February 4th. Does that all make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so we have the motion. Now we're going to vote.
Yes.
Did we take out 4C?
What was 4C?
It says no later than December 10th, chair to provide recommendation to the board on proceed preferred process.
Oh, yeah, we don't need C, so strike C as well.
Or C.
Strike, so yes, strike for A, strike for C, we'll re-letter those. The meetings will start by November 2024. And at the top, number 1, responsibilities, we have, selected by the student body and selected by the high school principal or designee. That is the motion. Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor
Motion is amended.
of I just read the motion as
I'm sorry, I
amended.
just got it.
Motion carries unanimously.
Great work. And on time, too. Yeah.
Dinner.
Okay, moving on to item 4. This concludes our special board meeting. The next scheduled regular board meeting is November 12th. Is there a motion to adjourn the special board meeting? Mr. Manna, Ms. Bleckenshire, all in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Good night, everyone.
Good night. That's what my-